Hey class, welcome back for another episode of Math 1 Distance Learning. So hopefully you're doing well. We have been working on inequalities, and more recently we've been working on compound inequalities. Those are the inequalities where you take one little inequality and you take another one and you put them together with the word and or the word or. So today what we're going to be working on is we're going to look at a couple of word problem inequalities. We're going to translate those into the mathematical expressions. We're going to graph them, and then you are going to create two of your own. So this is a short lesson, but let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to flip over to my DocuCam. You should have the handout called Writing Compound Inequalities. So let's get started here. Okay, so the first question is on daily temperature. I believe your handout says writing compound inequalities. Now this is an older version that I'm using. Okay, so here's the first word problem. It says one day the high temperature, so we're talking about daily temperature, the high temperature was 94 degrees and the low temperature was 60 degrees. Write and graph a compound inequality to represent the day's temperatures. So what we want to think about is so what was the lowest temperature of the day? And we want to think about what was the highest temperature of the day. And then obviously the rest of the temperatures for the day are going to fall in between. So this would be an in-betweener graph. Right? So the lowest possible temperature was 60 degrees. So we know that all the temperatures had to be higher or equal to 60. This was the least. It was at least 60 degrees. But we also know that the temperature did not get above 94. Okay, so this would be an and. So all the temperatures were greater than or equal to 60 degrees, and all the temperatures were less than or equal to 94 degrees. Okay, so now when we graph this, this is an in-between. It's an and problem. We want all the temperatures in between 60 and 94, but it could include 60 and it could include 94. So when we graph this, your graph should look like this right here. Okay, so I just went by 30s. I went 0, 30, 60, 90, 120. Normally here in California, we won't get to 120 degrees, but if you are in Arizona or Nevada, that's a possibility. So we want everything in between these numbers here. Okay, another way to think of it is we could write it like this. We can write it in between. Remember, I explained that if you're doing an in between like this with your X value, we want both of the arrows pointing that way. Okay. Now, another way to think of it is to do what's called a Venn diagram. So we want all the temperatures in between these two. So 60, 70, 85, 94, right? Anything that's in between those, but we don't want anything that's on the outside. We don't want anything less than 60, right? 45, 50, 59. Those are no good. And we don't want anything that's warmer than 94 degrees. So those are no good. So we're looking for the overlap. We're looking for the area they have in common. Okay, let's try the next one. The next one, Jose works as a soccer referee on the weekends. All right. And it says he prefers to work at most 2 games in a day. So he doesn't want to work more than 2 games in a day, at most 2 games, or at least 5 games. Okay, he prefers to work at most 2 games in a day, or at least 5 games for the whole weekend. Okay, so he gets hired as a referee, but he says, I don't want to work more than 2 games in a day, or I want you to give me, if I'm going to be working, I want to be there. So he says, I want at least 5 games for the weekend. Okay, he doesn't want to just show up, for an in-between amount. So it says write and graph a compound inequality to represent the number of games that Jose prefers to work. So we know that at most, that means the most in a day. So at most, he wants less than or equal to 2 if he's going to get just one day out of the week. Let's say he's just getting Saturday. Or he wants at least, that means the lowest would be 5. So he wants at least greater than or equal to 5. Okay, so if he's doing one day, he doesn't want more than 2. But for the weekend, if it's the whole weekend, then he says, okay, well then give me at least 5. If they want him to work for both days, then he wants at least 5 games if he's going to give up his whole weekend. Okay, so this is an OR problem. We know the graph is going to go out. Okay, so it should look something like this right here. Okay, so we know that he wants less than or equal to 2. You can't have negative games, so it'd just be 2, 1, or 0, or greater than or equal to 5. Okay, another way to think of it would be, so in this case, the overlap, there is no overlap, right? If the two lines, they don't go in, they go out. So there is no overlap. For this one, we want 2, 1, or 0. And over here, we want 5, 6, 7, or anything bigger than 5. So there actually is no overlap in the two inequalities. That's why I put none. There's nothing in the middle. They don't overlap. Okay, so I just did for you, one problem was an and problem. This was an in between, right? It's an in between. And then the second problem was an or problem. It's an out. There is no overlap in the middle. All right, so now what you have to do, so you should have copied all that down. If you want full credit, you have to have all that copied down. You can pause the video. Okay, now the second part of your assignment is you're going to actually write the compound inequalities. Okay, so the directions say create 2 compound inequality word problems. Okay, so one of them has to be an and problem, and one of them has to be an or problem. So you actually come up with the little story. You write the story. You write the story, then show me what the solution is here. What is the, what are the inequalities? So if the first one is an and problem, okay, then you're going to have something, blah, 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 and something else. So that would be an and problem. And then over here, you're going to graph it. And then on the second one, you have to do an or problem. So it's an or problem. Now, you can do temperature, you can do money, you can do elevation, you can do piggy bank, you could do a job, right? There's all kinds of things that you can do. You have to come up with 2 stories, 2 compound inequalities, okay? All right, so you could do exercise, how many minutes you exercised in a day. There's all kinds of things that you can do. All right, so that's your assignment. Go ahead and do those. This one I know is a little tougher because you have to think about it. So you might even want to start with your solution. So x is greater than or equal to something, and x is less than or equal to something. And then once you get these, then you could go back and write your story. That's another way to do it. All right. Okay, that's all I've got for you. And you can do this, okay? So we've been working on these compound inequalities. You can figure this out. You got to persevere. You got to think a little bit. It's not just a fill in the blank on this one. All right, we'll talk to you soon. We'll see you.